Summer Session number 9. We'll begin our first mindful minute by tuning into this present moment, taking some nice, calming breaths. Notice where the breath is right now and soften around it, releasing any tension that you find in the body. Become aware of sensations you're feeling right now, releasing tension anywhere else so that you can find a nice, stable, balanced, but also soft and malleable posture to sit in, like a nice soft lump of clay. You can adjust if necessary, like I did there. Become aware of the feeling of the paper and give a little stretch here to the hands. And now we'll begin our art part with some very basic shapes in this simple design that's on the sides here. So it has 2 straight lines. I'm going to start with those, picking out the largest shapes to begin with. Next will be these alternating triangles or zigzags going down the middle. Just going from one side to the other and leaving a little headroom so that I can zigzag back. I've missed the mark a little bit on my own with the drawing underneath, and that's fine. I could try and fix that, but this is my journal where I'm allowed to make mistakes, and so are you. These little fork guys are really just a line with a sort of soft U shape underneath. Going the other way can always be a little interesting because you might find that your wrist doesn't cooperate quite as easily. This would be a good time to rotate the page if that's available to you, or you can just see how it changes your ability to make straight lines in this direction. I messed up enough there to warrant erasing some of my own work, because even though I'm allowed to make mistakes in my journal, and so are you, you're also allowed to fix anything you want. This is your journal to do whatever you like with. So, these little forky guys in this direction are a little bit easier, because even though this isn't as easy on my wrist as the vertical direction, they are smaller, and any smaller shapes are going to be a little bit easier to do. And now this lizard has a lot of little interior designs, and I'm not going to do all of it, and neither do you have to do. So I'm going to just start by coloring in some basic shapes. And I wanted his little underbelly to be yellow, so I'm just doing a line where his little chin would be, and then these little petal shapes on his belly. Again, I'm not worried about making them perfect, because the underlying design will carry a lot through. And even though there's a lot of design here, it's fairly simple design work, so you can kind of trace over these shapes with some very basic petal shapes later with a pen or marker if you want to add in some more of those details. I wanted a streak of blue here on his head, so I'm going to use this other set of triangular petal shapes to make that fringe. I want a little bit more blue, but I'm thinking that I also might continue more yellow on this underside of his tail with some of these triangle shapes here. If you're following along at home, you can start with the sort of loose outline of the lizard instead of blocking in some of these shapes like I am. Or you can try it this way and see where you end up. Could be a very funky lizard that way. And that little tippy tip of the tail is what I think I'll do in blue. Now the rest of him I'm just going to color in green, except I'm just going to go around the eye first to make sure I avoid that. So this is a good way to kind of get not just some of those basic shapes that make up this lizard down and the little designy shapes underneath that, but also just to get a lot of color down really quickly. And if you are doing it this way and then doing lines over it, if they don't match up perfectly, that's fine. It ends up looking sketchier and a little bit more fun. So as long as you can calm your inner perfectionist, then it ends up being, like I said, funky little lizard who might not have, all the lines perfectly lined up. But again, this is your journal. This is a great place to be teaching our inner perfectionists to let go a little of the idea of perfect and just accept whatever happy accidents happen on the page. Or when you're trying to say the words happy accidents. Really, any accent can be a happy accent if you laugh about it. Now this green I'm using is actually kind of starting to run out, and I like to save markers like this that are in that stage because they can be useful in some places where you don't want to put down as much color. And for this little guy, I really do only want a light pass. But I could have also done that in pencil, which has a lot more control over how much color you're putting down than pen. Or marker, in this case. I've started using pens, just because I want his little eye to stand out. I'm also going to use a nice bold dark green for his outline. If you're following this at home and you want to try doing something fairly difficult, you can try doing this in one line, as I'm attempting to do here. It will be harder if you don't have the underlying design to follow like I do, but it can still be a fun exercise in really bringing you into a mindful art space, because while you're trying to follow this line, you'll have to look at the design and then your paper, and the design and your paper, and the design and your paper, and really keep track of both. So your attention and your awareness will have to stay on these two objects for the duration of this big line. And then there's this little inner line here. And that gives us the lizard's silhouette, which has a lot of nice angles to it. I'm just using a thinner marker to go in and finish some of these lines, so it won't be as bold or thick as the outside line. but it will just help to finish defining some of these shapes a little. And I'll go in and do a couple little designs as well, like the ones around his eyes. I'd like those to be nice and bold. Before I completely run out of sand, though that is drawing near, I have some of these metallic pens that I've discovered don't bleed through as much if I work the way I just did here by putting down some color with either pencil or one of my gel markers like I did, because that sort of sits on top of the page and gives this more inky sort of pen marker something to bleed into so that it doesn't bleed through the page as much. So I'll finish up a couple of these little designs on his arm just so that we can find a nice natural point to stop before moving on to the next mindful minute, where we'll just reset and come back to this present moment, taking a few calming breaths and noticing where our posture is. We can let out any tension that may have formed in the shoulders, straightening the spine back to its natural curves, maybe looking up at the sky to make sure some tension gets let out of the neck. Noticing if the breath has become contracted at all while we were working, or if little pools of tension collected anywhere else. And finally, just doing some nice soft wrist circles before we move on to the writing prompt, which is: create a summer fun bucket list. What things can you tick off the soonest? Which are going to be harder? So as usual, I like to start by pulling out some keywords. Anything that stands out, really. And I think summer fun is the main keyword I want to pull out here. And the rest I'll try and keep within this little palette that I'd started with, which matches a little piece of paper and some of the stickers I had selected for my crafting part. I'll get some green up here to match my lizard. I might do the 2 follow-up questions in their own separate colors as well. That way I can color code my answer to this prompt just a little bit. You might even just use green tick marks for some things. And even just because this journal prompt is asking about a question that's more future oriented, doesn't mean I can't use it as an opportunity to record some things that happened before already. So I might start off my list by thinking of some things that I've already done this summer. Because, after all, it is already August, so 2/3 of the summer have already gone by. So, this is actually a good opportunity to review some of the things that have already happened and think of whatever else I can fit in. So, something I've done a few times that I always love doing is go out dancing. And I would love to make some opportunities for more dancing, which I should have coming up on the horizon. So that'll be a nice, easy one, and definitely something I can tick off the soonest since I'm already planning my next dance off. I'm just going to check back on my little schedule here for some things, but I did a all-night meditation with the monastery that I study at. So, ain't no party like a Zen party. And yeah, so that's something I've ticked off already. But as a follow-up, I'd like to do some park sessions before the season's over. I haven't gotten out and done that quite as much as I have in summers past. So I'll see if I can fit some more of those in. And I just recently did some camping with friends. So I don't know if I'll get a chance to do more of that this summer. Well, maybe actually. So we'll see if we can fit that in. And the thing that's always hardest is travel, because it takes a lot of organizing. But we do have a trip on the horizon that my partner and I are already planning to take. And if I can fit it in at any point, I'd love to go to the beach. My partner doesn't like doing that as much as I do, so it might be just something I decide to do one day while he's working or sleeping in or something. And I really need to get my bike out. I haven't had so many opportunities to bike around as I would have liked by now. So that's so far a pretty good list of things I've done and things I'm planning to do and things I want to do. But I'm just going to wander back to doing some of these nice repetitive designs. Just let my mind wander over that question while I do this. It can help while doing some of these little petals that just repeat to just ask, what else? What else would I like to do this summer? What else can I do this summer? What else have I done this summer that I would like to do again? And the trick here is to not get too sucked into the design, which I just wanted to check there isn't bleeding through, but staying mindful of the question again. And now that I am thinking of it, I'm just going to mark down some places that I have traveled to, because this sort of working in back and forth from what's happened to what I'd like to happen to what I'm planning to happen, that can just add a whole lot of extra sort of links that your memory and future planning can use to think of other things. So think of not just your future plans, but what you've done. Use your memories. Think of your present experience. Is there anything right now that you would really like to do? And could you make time for that today? What about any fantasies? You may never get the chance to go on a tall ship, but the beach is available. Or perhaps a little smaller, more rentable boat. It occurs to me as well that something I've done is go to my nature museum to draw some things. But I would like to go to other museums in town, as we do have a lot of good ones here. So there's the Science Museum, the Natural History Museum, the Art Gallery nearby, and then the War Museum and Aviation Museum are pretty cool too. So hopefully I'll get some time this summer to sneak those in. But I'm happy with that for now. Now for our last mindful minute, let's check back in with where the breath has gotten to. And try and soften around it. And take note of what's happened to the posture. See if we've caved in or scrunched up in the shoulder of our dominant writing hand. Release any tension we find there. And bring our posture back to something more balanced and soft and malleable, but also stable and centered in front of our journal. Become aware of the feeling of the paper under your hands, the seat, and maybe wiggle the fingers a little to see if there's any tension there. Give one last stretch before we move on to the crafting part. So for this, we want to pull out some more colors from our palette and any themes that mimic or mirror the writing or art prompts. So I have this ship and globe papers that I think I want to make a little pocket with that globe sort of making a tab that I can pull out, that I can put some stickers around, which I have lined up on the top of my desk there. I have a Petit Prince themed sort of thing with his little rose and a globe. And I know that the summer fun bucket list wasn't literally supposed to be a bucket list, and Le Petit Prince does have a bit of a morbid overtone to it, but I still think of it as a very fun story because it's one of my favorite stories, so I'm biased. But he is going out and exploring, and doing things he's always wanted to do and seeing the world. So I like linking that theme up with this summer fun bucket list. I'm going to actually rearrange some of my writing just to give myself a little bit more space here for this sort of silly function that I want my papers to perform. As usual, I like to frame my writing prompt in something that pulls out some of the colors in there a little bit. I have some starry tapes that go with my Petit Prince and his spacey theme. If you're looking for other functions for your papers to perform besides pockets or frames, you can also use them to make little doors by just taping one side off like I did there. And then that allows it to flap open and you can have more space for writing underneath it that way. These sort of facetious functions add just an extra little dimension to your journal that create more areas for hidden writing. Or recently I actually added one of these little doors on top of some writing, which is something I've been doing because sometimes my journal is a place to vent. And I might vent about someone or something that's gotten me all huffy. And every now and again, I think it's good for me to go back in with a bit of a clearer head. And I'll just either write what ended up happening later, because often it'll shake out that something turned out to be better than I was thinking at that moment, or you make amends with people, you straighten things out. And rather than write that later in my journal, I found it an interesting practice to go back in and add that as like a little flap or sticky note sort of on top of where I was venting about it, so that there's not really a correction so much as the rest of the story is right there. It's a very positive way to sort of add a little bright side or silver lining to journal entries that are otherwise a bit more stormy and dark. Because you're allowed to have those dark thoughts and stormy moments. The thing I love about journaling is that it really does allow you to explore your emotions in a way that we don't always get to, because we tend to repress emotions a lot, especially in society and the way that people are expected to behave as adults without having any strong emotions. So silly things like this little pocket with a tab, I could write on the back of that little thing so that I have something that I want to express but don't necessarily want to be easily visible. Or I could do that behind a closed door of a piece of paper. And doing that this way just gives another sense of privacy to your journal, which hopefully is private and the people in your home are respecting this. But either way, it's not about what you think is going to happen with your journal and the people in your house. It's what you feel. That's the important thing here. And sometimes what you feel can be at odds with what you think. That's fine. our thoughts and feelings don't have to be all completely cohesive or only ever run in one direction. You can have all sorts of conflicting thought feelings. So I've put this little rose on that hidden planet in there, and I'm going to mimic that by having my little prince outside of it on his planet. Which, if you know the story, kind of mimics him thinking about his rose while he's on Earth and she's back on her planet. Try and use the backing to keep that lined up. Stick that down there. Going back to the idea of thoughts and feelings and linking that up with a big part of this being mindfulness, I feel I should note here that a lot of people can confuse mindfulness with the repression or controlling of emotions. And that's not necessarily being mindful, because being mindful of your emotions is recognizing them, knowing that they come up, and just noticing what happens when they come up. So, especially to get around that perception that mindfulness is about being an emotionless sort of Mr. Miyagi figure just sitting there austerely, your journal can be a great place to write down, I'm feeling really angry right now, or I'm really sad today. You don't have to analyze it, but you can. You don't have to change it, importantly, either. You can just let the emotion run its course. And sometimes writing about it can help it run its course. And then, if you want to practice a little bit more mindfulness, once you've written about it, you can kind of open up around it and just use something like what we do in the mindful minutes to do that. Notice where your breath is after you've been writing about an emotion. Notice how your posture's gotten. And maybe straighten, find a little balance. Let out tension. Find calm breaths to come back to. And maybe pick up a pen or a marker and do a little doodling. That's a great way to balance out when strong emotions come up. Because sometimes I find that getting back to a neutral place is so much more accessible than going to a happy place when you have strong, upset emotions come up. So, thank you for attending my very tiny TED Talk in this one. I hope you enjoyed your crafting moments. I know I certainly did, and I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. I hope you are too. And I hope that somewhere in between doing this and any other journaling sessions that you join me for, you get some of your own sessions in where you explore making all kinds of fun little worlds in your journal. The music, as always, is from Lofi Girl and will be found on the playlist Lo-Fi's to Live By's. Thank you so much for watching.